Hello, everyone, and welcome into the second module for the digital marketing course. So, today we're going to be going through the importance of market research. This is such an important concept because you're really building the foundation of the digital marketing strategy um, when you're starting with market research, and it's one of the very first things you should always be doing when building that out. It informs the strategy of the business or the social enterprise you're going into because you are focusing on who the target audience is. And we might be talking about customers a lot of the time, but there might be other stakeholders, as we talked about in the introduction module, that you need to be aware of. So, this part of the digital marketing strategy, doing the research is very important for that reason. So, in terms of activities for market research, there are a lot of things you can be doing, and multiple activities can be done at different stages as well. So, it's important that you kind of understand the different tools you need for different outcomes. But the overall goal is for these activities to provide valuable data and insights. And what you're looking for really is to gather enough data to understand what the needs of the stakeholders are, what their preferences are in terms of what are they wanting and what are their motivations. So that when you are then putting together, whether it's a social media campaign or email newsletter or producing content for your channels, that you are actually making informed decisions, that you're actually doing something that you know is aligned with the people that you're trying to talk to, as opposed to guessing. Because the more guessing you're doing, the less um, the, the less successful you're going to be with your digital marketing strategy. So it's about becoming as much aware as you are of your customer, but also this is more than just building the foundation of the digital marketing strategy. Market research is something you will be doing on a constant basis. So you're constantly learning about your customers as you move through the business. Uh, no matter if it's a brand new business or a very established business or a social enterprise that's already well known, um, there will be some things you'll see here that you will need to stay on top of, because by always being glued in with your customers and knowing how they're changing, knowing the changes in their environment, that will help you then in curating a message that is much more aligned with them and making sure that they're not forgetting about you or the business. So, again, keep that in mind. It's a living, breathing component of digital marketing, and it's not just something you do at the very beginning. Again, tools for market research, there are a myriad of solutions out there these days. And it's really up to you kind of to learn what you need to do as you go into each business. Each will be very specific with their own needs. And based on that, a quick Google search will kind of give you a lot of options of what you can use. But for example, we'll be going through the likes of survey softwares that will allow you to put out surveys and gather data that way. There's analytics, whether they're inbuilt to the likes of your website editors or something that you implement into your website on a custom basis. Um, and all of these tools are there basically to help you gather data. Um, and again, it all comes down to the budget of the company or the social enterprise you're in as well. Some might not have the budget to lend themselves to tools, but there's a lot of things you can do on a very lean budget or no budget at all. So you'll see all the options as we go through this. So I'll just move my head over here. So when it comes to market research activities, there are two buckets that I would put them into. The first is primary research. Primary research is anything where you're seeing firsthand the behavior or the feedback from the customer or the stakeholder. So you'll see here, you have user interviews, surveys, focus groups, and website analytics. These are all examples of primary research activities because you are interacting with the customer or stakeholder on a one-to-one basis, especially with the first three there. And with website analytics, you're seeing firsthand the behavior of the customer. It's not coming from a different source, or it's not being changed. The data isn't being changed before it comes to you. You're seeing it as it is. And then with each of those, then you'll see there is the label of qualitative or quantitative. So quantitative is anything where you can have almost a black and white answer to. So usually you're talking about numbers here. For example, for surveys, if you are putting together a survey, you might be asking people to score something between 0 and 10, or to give 0 to 5 stars. And with that, it kind of gives you almost a mathematical feedback where you can say, well, 50% of people said that they would give a 9 out of 10 for our service. So that's what quantitative is. Qualitative then is very much so about things that are more intangible. So for the likes of user interviews, it's a really good way of getting qualitative data because you're talking to a person, you're having a conversation, and they can tell you about their emotions or their stories, things that you can't necessarily put numbers on. Even though I will note that for user interviews, you can get quantitative data as well, but usually user interviews are used for the qualitative data to tell the story. So that's your examples there of primary research. Then we have secondary research. This is data that isn't coming firsthand from the actual user that you're focusing on. It's coming through the likes of database research, trade publishings, and competitive analysis, as you can see here. A lot of the time, it's mostly quantitative. There can be qualitative options as well. But secondary, you're kind of pulling on the research that's out there available already. And it's a good way in terms of getting at a more high-level view and to get a more holistic view of maybe a community of people. So we'll be going through these in this module. Okay, so we'll start here first of all with user interviews. With user interviews, it's a one-to-one conversation where you're looking for insights about the experiences of the customer or the stakeholder. You're looking for, what their motivations are, what are their needs, and you want to understand why perhaps there might be alignment between the customer or the stakeholder that you're interviewing and the company you're working with. And sometimes you'll see there isn't, and that's good too. You'll need to understand why that is the case as well. So in terms of putting together user interviews, the first thing you need to do is to define a target persona that you're going to engage with. So this is important because you don't want to be talking to every single person when not every single person is relevant to the business. For example, if if one of you was working with a makeup company, for example, and it was makeup specifically for women in the age category of 20 to 30, it would not be a very useful exercise for you to go to talk to men that were aged 50 to 60 when that isn't the target customer. So that allows you to kind of narrow down your search of who you can recruit for your user interviews. And the more specific it can be, the easier it can be as well in terms of recruiting people and making sure that you're talking to people that are much more likely to give you the insight that you need. So the second tip I have here is to prepare your questions for your user interviews. I will link here as well a book called The Mom Test. And it's a really good book that kind of goes through how to conduct user interviews. Um, it's called the Mom Test because if you ever go to a parent or a guardian as a child, you could show them a scribble on a page and they will say, well, that is amazing. You're so talented and everything. Whereas they might only see a scribble on the page, but they want to be nice to you. And the Mom Test kind of tackles that fear that we have of talking to people and making sure that when we do go into user interviews, that we are not scared of getting um, the information that might be detrimental in our eyes. Because if you must at least ask one question in a user interview that you are actually nervous about. Because if you get information that would say, for example, oh, I don't like your business at all, I think it's really bad, that is going to hurt. But it's such a valuable experience to go through that as well, because then you can ask them, why don't you like the business? Tell me more. And they can go into their own story of why they don't like it, which is a really valuable uh, point of data, because then you can go back to your company and say, so I learned this from a person who could be a potential customer, but they're not because of this reason. So don't be afraid, basically, is kind of what I'm trying to say here. Um, so always when you're going into preparing your questions, make them open-ended. When I say open-ended, I'm saying when the person is answering you back, they shouldn't be able to say yes or no. There might be a few questions you'll ask that will have that response, but usually you might say, um, tell me about a time when you went shopping online. It's very open. It's concise enough that it shows that we're talking about their online shopping experience, but that could be for anything. And that allows you then to kind of listen to their story and then ask either the next question that's on your list of prepared questions, or to then ask a question that you maybe didn't think about before. So that's really important to be kind of ready for that as well, to go off script, because that's where a lot of valuable information could be hidden as well that we still don't know about. Then the third tip I have here is to plan how you will conduct your user interview. You can do a few practice runs even by yourself. Pretend that you're talking to someone. For me, usually what I do is I just have a pen and paper if I'm talking to someone in person. I then, if I'm talking to someone online through the likes of Zoom, I use my notes app because I tend to type faster than I write. So that's really good. You can also bring a recorder and take a voice recording, or if you're on Zoom, to do a recording of that as well. Um, that's a very useful thing, but you are kind of going into the area then of privacy and making sure you're following guidelines properly with that. So if you are doing that, make sure you have a document that shows that there is engagement between you and the person you're interviewing, and they gave you permission either through a signature or a response to an email to say that yes, they did give you permission to record them and to use it in your research. So just to be considerate of that as well with privacy and all of that. And there's lots of brilliant software out there as well for that. And one of them is called Descript. So what that does is you can upload a video or voice recording, and it'll automatically, using AI, siphon out the conversation and label it as well of who is talking. They kind of start off with the default of like participant one or participant two, and you can put in the name of the person then if you want to, or your own name, and it'll actually label all of the transcript below that afterwards, which is really valuable for time saving. And if it's the case that you need to be sharing this information as well. So those out there, so it's worth looking into it if you have the resources to do so. Then at the end, obviously, is the breakdown and the analysis of the interview. Probably the easiest way to do this is to get a lot of sticky notes and start writing down little bits that have come through in the user interviews. Keep it as short as you can, whether it's one word or a very short sentence. And once you start writing things down, you might see there are patterns coming through, especially if you've done a few user interviews and you see that each interview has a common thread. That's a very valuable thing for you to know because you see a commonality there with your customers, which you can use then to implement into your strategy if it's applicable. So let me expand this here now. So in terms of the tools that you will need for user interviews, for during the interview, like I said, notepad and pen will do fine. If you're online, you can use the Notes app. You can also use a recorder and also have the consent form as well. If you are recording anything, especially if you're taking personal details, that's very important to have a consent form. And a quick Google will generate a template for that if you need it. Then post-interview, like I said, transcription tools like Descript, that's the type of there, so it should be Descript. Descript is a really good one if you're doing online recordings. You can kind of take everything in and sort it out for you very good. For me, then, I use Google Sheets quite a lot for my user interviews. It's up to you how you do it. If it's kind of to map out maybe the more of the quantitative things, so if there's questions such as like where a person um, works, like where their home office is, like you could have like a red and green system where if it's true that they work at home, it's green. If it's not, it's red. And that will kind of eventually build up a visual as you add more people to the sheet and the answers. Like you'll see if there's a lot of green or a lot of red for certain questions, that there's a thread there as well. And also, CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management. So you could have maybe a tool that's already being used within the company you're going into, such as Salesforce or HubSpot. It could be a very useful thing as well, because if you are doing user interviews, more than likely they are potential customers or leads as well. And so it might be useful for you to keep note of that as well within the current CRM system, or just have a list of for yourself as well. Of who you interacted with, especially if it's something that you would like to follow up on again in the future and that you got permission to retain their information, like their names and their email addresses, for example, and the permission to follow up with them in the future again. So always be respectful of people in that perspective. Okay, so the next activity we have here are surveys. So these can be used for both quantitative and qualitative, as I said. Quantitative in terms of if you wanted to get figures in terms of finding out maybe on a range of 0 to 10 how happy someone is with the service or product. You can also ask open-ended questions here as well and allow the person to write out their story about their experience or whatever it may be. So it really depends on what your goal is for the survey itself. And I think that's where the first tip here comes into play, is clearly define your objectives. Ask yourself, why am I putting this survey together? Be very clear of what you want to get out of it so that you then know how to structure it and ask questions that are going to give you the best data possible. Second tip is keep it concise and relevant. One of the big issues with surveys is people are afraid once they click into it, it's going to be a lot of effort, and then they will, jump out of it and not complete it, and then you're left without that data. So first of all, up front, before the person even opens the link, communicate maybe how long it is. You can say that it's 2 minutes long, or it has only a certain amount of questions, and that will make people more inclined to actually finish it. Um, Also, if it is something that it's a large survey, again, communicate very clearly what the objectives are. If it's a survey, that is going to help the end user or the stakeholder that you're trying to attract, then communicate that and how you are helping them by gathering this data. And they will then be more inclined to fill it out. And then if there is a budget there as well, you could put a prize to the side as well and advertise it as something that if you fill in the survey and submit your email at the end, then there's a prize to be won. Again, that's up to the discretion of the company and the accounts department or wherever you're working. So just it's an option for sure. But again, keep it short if it's something that you're doing without a budget. And usually I would put maybe around a maximum of 10, around 10. 10 isn't a huge amount, and it kind of helps people think, well, if it's only 10 questions, I'll be done within a few seconds. But the thing is, you have to be very careful then what questions you're asking and maximizing what you're getting from each question. Third tip here is use a mix of question types. It's nice to kind of mix it up for the person that's doing the survey, especially with loads of different options out there with Google Forms and Typeform. They give you the ability to do different formats to answer the question, whether it's a sliding scale or inserting text or numbers. It can just help break it up a bit, especially if it's a longer survey, not to make it feel monotonous. And then finally, do a pilot test and iterate on it. So publish the survey, get someone to test it for you, make sure the data is coming in correctly, and see then if there's any changes you should be doing before you're releasing it to the public or sending out to your list. So in terms of tools for surveys, one of my favorite tools at the moment is Tally, tally.so, as you can see there. It's actually free for, I think, 90% of its offerings, and it allows you to really customize the survey in terms of adding sections to it. You can also put in logic there as well. So if someone answers yes or no to a question, that it'll kind of create two branches of like where that participant can go when it comes to questions, and they'll have a different set of questions based on their answers. So it's really good from that perspective. Again, Google Forms is always available for free as well. But again, I found it doesn't have as much options there to really make it unique or kind of structured in a way that would be specific to you. And then the other ones, Typeform and SurveyMonkey, are paid mostly, and they're well trusted as well. So there is that component if someone sees Typeform or SurveyMonkey that it is a trusted software and they're likely to kind of feel safe inputting the information as well. Another tool I've put in here is ChatGPT. This is a brilliant resource in order for you to experiment with the type of questions you can put in. So you can put into ChatGPT maybe what the topic is of the survey, ask it to generate a sample of 10 to 20 questions, and you can see which ones work best. You can also ask it, what are the types of ways that participants can respond to the survey for each question? It's a really good place to kind of brainstorm if you're working by yourself and run questions through it as well. So just be curious and creative with ChatGPT when using it as well as a way to finesse your survey. Focus groups is the next one we have here. So these are small moderated discussion groups where you bring people that are relevant to the problem or the challenge that you're trying to address for the company. It's great as well in terms of gathering data from a group of people when looking at your digital marketing strategy and what you should be focusing on moving forward. They're really good in terms of when you have user interviews, you're doing your one-to-one conversations and you're getting, good data from that one person. But the advantage of doing focus groups alongside that then is when people talk, someone's opinion or insight might spark an idea that they have or a thought that they have as well that they wouldn't have thought about by themselves. So it kind of has that bouncing effect of people kind of being in a natural conversation and sharing their thoughts, and it's really good from that perspective. But it does need to be organized very well as well in order for it to be successful. So the first thing I would say here for a focus group is to clearly define your objectives. What are you trying to learn here? Because it allows you to make a list of the questions that you want to ask, but also if there are other questions that might come up in your head that you can think, actually, that's very much aligned with what we need to find out. So I'll ask this question as well, or to allow questions within um, the session to take its own form as well and allow things to go maybe off tangent, because maybe there's information there that you didn't think about before. So if you understand your objectives, you know kind of where to pull back or where to allow the conversation to kind of take its own flow. The second tip I have here is recruit a diverse group. Um, what I would say here is, yes, recruit a diverse group in terms of a diverse group within maybe your persona or your target market. Um, Obviously, you're going to have people come in that are very much maybe aligned somehow with the business. But for you to have a diverse group in terms of like male, female, maybe what they're working on, maybe their age range, just to kind of make sure that you're getting the different perspectives. The third tip we have here is prepare thoughtful questions and scenarios. So as I said up above, that kind of ties into your objectives as well. Once you know what your objective is, you'll be able to craft your questions and you'll be able to maybe give scenarios as well. You could say within a focus group, um, you know, if you're talking about maybe a digital marketing strategy and you're trying to find out where to go in terms of social media channels, you could be telling them, uh, at the moment there is a huge uptick when it comes to the likes of short form content online. So we're talking about the likes of TikTok and Snapchat and YouTube using shorts. Could you all tell me about your experience in using or interacting with shorts? And then allowing the focus group to take the floor and start talking about how they interact or don't interact with short form content. And the fourth tip I have here is skilled facilitation. Now, this takes a bit of practice really, because with a focus group, you want to allow people to talk, but you don't want to lose control of it either, because people can get maybe excited about a topic and go totally off the tangent, and then it's maybe not adding value to the exercise at all. So you need to be able to see where the line is with that and pull back. Um, and that's difficult sometimes because you might let the conversation go off to the side because it might be interesting, it might be valuable, but sometimes you'll have to make a judgment call and kind of bring it back. But do it in a way as well that people don't feel shut down, that they feel they can still continue on in the conversation in another capacity when another question is asked of them. So when it comes to focus group tools, during the session, if it's online, you could be using the likes of Zoom or Google Meetings, making sure that everyone has access to get into it. Then if you're doing it in person or even online, you might prefer to have notepad and pen to write down notes yourself. It might be good as well to have someone there as well to be taking notes and someone to be asking questions. Same goes for the user interviews actually. Um, it's always good to be able to be in the conversation and to be in the flow of it, which can be a bit difficult sometimes when you're writing and trying to be listening and coming up with the next question as well. It is a skill that you will build as well, but it is nice sometimes to have someone else that is just taking notes while you are just having the conversation. Um, so yeah, and during the session, another thing you could be using is the Notes app on your phone or your laptop. Again, a recorder, but if you're having a recorder, you will need a consent form. Always make sure you have consent of taking people's details, especially if it's being recorded in that manner. Same thing again here, very similar to user interviews actually, is the transcription tools such as Descript. Google Sheet again for recording details. If you can break down maybe the objectives you had with the learning outcomes and make the note there for each of those in the Google Sheet. A CRM as well for if you're in the process of maybe following up in the next year to do this like an annual thing, that you do know who you've talked to before and can then bring them in. That kind of allows you to see the customer journey as well, if that's the case. So analytics is another tool you can be using for market research. And this could be looking at the likes of website traffic. You'll see that inbuilt with a lot of website editors these days, where you can see how many visits you have on each day or each week or each month. User behavior then is looking at, if someone goes in, are they clicking a lot on one side of the page or the other side of the page? Are they getting lost? So that could be you looking at heat maps. Heat maps is kind of a um, on the likes of Hotjar, for example, Hotjar. Hotjar will allow you to see the heat map of your website or your web page, which means you'll see where is the area of the website that is most used. Usually that's kind of like where the mouse is on the page the most. And for a lot of websites, you'll see that will be, if there's content at the top of the page that people are reading through, you'll see that there will be a heat map there. In terms of it's being used a lot, same with the menu, a lot of people will be clicking up there. So that's what that is in terms of user behavior example. And performance as well. You'll see, the loading time of pages. Is it fast enough for people to be accessing the page, or is the website too slow and then turning people off? So there's a lot here. And again, this is really down again to budget, but a lot of analytics are actually either included these days in packages that companies already have, or there are free versions of the paid software out there as well that can give you some data as well, and can probably show you the value of it as well. And if you feel there is more value to be gained by the company or the social enterprise, you can also make a case for that as well to bring forward and show them the value of having this information. So the first tip for using analytics is to set clear objectives and KPIs. KPIs are key performance indicators. They're just like a KPI could be 1,000 individual visitors on the website each month. It's very important for you to understand what you're trying to learn. You could have all the data in the world, but if you don't know exactly what data is actually going to be good for the business, it's not really going to lend much use to you. So be sure what the objectives are, and set them, and that will help you then decide what analytics and data you should be looking at, because they're all important, but you probably have your top data that you want to be looking out for, because it will mean that either it's attracting people in, such as volunteers if you're like a social enterprise, or it could be showing that there's a lot more people coming to the website to buy or invest in your services. So that's another perspective. Second tip here is regularly monitor and analyze data. As I said in the beginning, market research is a living, breathing component. It's not something you do at the beginning and then forget once you go forward. Then you need to keep watch of the analytics as they go along. That's what gives your company or social enterprise the agility to move when it comes to changes in the environment and trends that are happening in the industry, and for you to be on top of your game. Third tip is track customer journeys. For analytics, it's really beneficial as well to see at specific types of customers how they are maybe interacting online. You'll be able to see, oh, there are people that come on for half an hour to our website, and there are people that come on to our website and leave again very fast. You can see for those journeys what's happening from start to finish, whether it's they're going to a certain page, reading about it, are they adding something to the cart, are they leaving the cart, how far along did they go in terms of the process of buying before they leave the cart. So there's a lot there to be done as well. Google Analytics is very good for this because you can do specific maps, and it might be more of a technical job as well if you don't have the skills to do it yet. But there are so much information available on YouTube if you wanted to invest more time in Google Analytics and putting together the customer journey so you understand for each stage that a customer is on your website, um, are they are they doing the actions that you need them to be doing or not, and allowing you then to be able to look at where they're maybe abandoning their customer journey and seeing that as the place where you need to be focusing on then in terms of making it easier or more seamless for them in order to go to the next step. And then test and iterate. Again, basically keep an eye on what you're looking at for analytics, and change as you go along as well, because maybe some metrics might come out to be not useful for you at all. Like some companies might see that there is a huge amount of people looking at their website, but maybe that isn't translating into signups for volunteers if you're a social enterprise, or translating into customers if it's something that you're selling, whether it's a product or service. So look at other data then that might help you understand what translates into the business outcome that you want. So in terms of, in terms of analytic tools, as I said, you have Google Analytics. It could be already in what you have in the company that you're going into. So do ask if they have it implemented or not. If you can't do it and there's something that needs to be implemented, you could ask for a small enough budget to implement it, because it's not a lot really. Because for Google Analytics, a lot of the time you take a snippet of code from Google Analytics and put it into your website. If the company is using the likes of WordPress, for example, you can slot it in there quite easy as well by yourself without the need of a developer. But if you do need a developer, you can always ask them if there's someone that they use, or you can find someone on Upwork yourself and get the approval to go that way as well. Then Hotjar, I mentioned Hotjar earlier. It's a really good tool. It has a free version as well, but if you wanted more data in terms of not being limited of what you track, you can pay for it as well. But what it does basically is it does recordings of visitors on your website. Basically, you can go into Hotjar and see videos, screen recordings of people on your website and see where they're going, clicking into different buttons, different pages. It's really useful for you to understand, does someone look as if they're a bit confused? If their mouse is going back and forth from one place to the other, obviously then you can be like, actually, there's something there that they're not sure about. Maybe we need to make it clearer. So it's really good for that. Same with heat map as well. It can show you where visitors kind of congregate when they come to your website. Are they focusing on the top of the page, or do they scroll down to the bottom and all of the interaction is there? It all depends. It's a really simple way of just understanding the user behaviors. And then similarweb.com, you can just go to that website and plot in a URL or link to a website, and gives you some data that's available publicly there as well, and how you would rank publicly there in terms of the industry you're in, for example, and all of that. So it's a really good one to do, and also a good one for competitive analysis as well, actually, to see what your competitors are like. Then for social media as well, if you're looking at that, it's inbuilt most of the time. So Instagram, I know you can go in and see your profile of stats of visitors and followers, and has it gone up, has it gone down. If you're using third-party apps such as Hootsuite and Social Insider, you can go in and connect your social media platforms there, and that will kind of bring together graphs and other data insights for you as well. So again, be clear with your objectives with analytics, and that will kind of like direct you in the way to the proper tools then for you to use. So the next one I have here for market research is competitive analysis. And this is looking at your competitors within a specific market or industry. And it can help you make decisions and make effective strategies, because it's extremely important that when you're out there that you're actually distinguishing yourself from others in the market. Um, and I know for the likes of social enterprises that you might not have necessarily a competitor in the market, which is often the case for social enterprises. But it's good for you in this exercise to think about, well, who else, even if it's a for-profit business, that is serving the people that we are trying to serve as well. And it just gives you a good insight then into um, what they're doing, what you're doing, knowing the difference is. So when you're putting together your messaging or your content, that it's very, very clear to who you're delivering it to. Um, One note I would say for competitive research is competitive analysis as well is to keep it very simple. You can Google online templates for competitive analysis, but even start yourself with a simple Google Sheet or spreadsheet and just start putting in the name of the competitor, the website, and then it really depends on each of the companies you're in of what you need to be tracking. So, for example, for a startup I'm working in, I'm looking at different features and I kind of mark it yes, no if they have the feature, if they don't have the feature, which allows me to kind of stay on top of, okay, who is actually providing the same services that I'm providing at the moment. Um, and you could also put in the likes of who are they addressing as their target market in their marketing. And you could be looking at, oh, they're addressing small businesses that have 50 to 100 people. The others are maybe doing bigger companies with 100 to 200 people working in it. So it's really specific to each company what you need to be gathering. So I recommend to uh, know what that is, make a simple list first, and then turn it into a Google Sheet and start recording there. So the next thing we have here is database research. So there's a huge amount out there, and a lot of the time they are actually paid. So I'd say for anyone that is in a small or micro business or even social enterprises, chances are that the money might not be available for all of these things that are mentioned. But for social enterprises, for example, you can find a lot online here. For example, educational institutions, you have Sacramento State, which kind of has a lot of documents available there for about social entrepreneurship uh, across kind of various fields, as you can see there, for the likes of hunger, poverty, homelessness, for social problems. Um, so that's really interesting for you just to know that there are these options there as well. You might not have access to them all the time, but just to be aware that there are databases out there that have um, the likes of industry trends, industry reports, anything like that. But again, depends if this is needed or not, or if you have the resources for it. But yeah, it's worth exploring anyways to see if there's anything available that is aligned to you. Then you have trade publishings as well. So the magazines is kind of a good example here. There's a magazine for almost every field and industry you could think of now. Um, One thing you could look up, for example, are in many countries now for their libraries, their public libraries, that you can get an app to look up um, a myriad of publishings from newspapers to magazines. So it's a really good resource that's free most of the time for you to look at to see if there's anything there that's in the field of the company you're working for, just to stay up to date. And also, this can lend itself into the content marketing component as well, because if you're finding information online that's relevant to your stakeholders, your customers, the people that are going to be watching your social media content or any content for that matter, it's really good for that, for you to be able to share that and to share stats and all of that and educate the people you're engaging with. SWOT analysis is a really good way of simply mapping out what the strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats are for the company you're working for. A strength stands for internal factors of the company. You know, what do you do really well? Like, do you have a really talented team? Is the product you have considered to be very innovative? Um, then with weakness, then it's also internal factors again, but it could be looking at what's kind of stopping you from growing further. It could be the likes of having a limited budget, that you don't have enough to invest in to move faster than you are at the moment. Then the bottom two then are external factors, and for opportunities, you're looking at um, what are the trends that are out there, such as on social media, that you could be jumping on board for, that could really work for you and your company to spread the message of what you're doing and to make more sales or to reach more people with what you're offering as a social enterprise. And then with threats, you're looking at what things are out there that could potentially harm you. A lot of the time, the algorithms on social media could be doing that. We see that with a lot of different causes around the world, and how the automatic algorithms can kind of like slow things down from being distributed far and wide. So there's a huge amount there that you could be putting into it. So it's really good for you to do this for the company that you're in. Again, I would do it kind of from your own perspective first, in terms of how you see the company as you go into it, because you will have fresh eyes, and that's very valuable for the companies that you're going into and all the enterprises. And then working with the team or your supervisor after that to kind of fill in the blanks, that maybe things that you don't know about, and they can kind of like flesh it out a bit more as well. And not only is this only useful for the company you're working for, it could actually be very useful for you to do that on your competitors as well, to understand what their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats are as well. You won't know everything, but if you can at least think about it creatively, it's going to be really good for you to kind of show where you can distinguish yourself from others in the market. So, identifying the target market, very crucial, really, when you're starting off on this journey in digital marketing now. We're talking here about looking at the demographics of people. For example, what are the ages? What do they do? What are their education levels? It really depends on each company what the demographic samples are that you need to be focusing on. Geography, then, if you're in small, kind of micro, small businesses that offer maybe services that are in-person based, like, it might be very limited to a location. Whereas if you're an online business that can be offering anything online, it could be global. But again, you'll have different areas that are probably going to be more beneficial to you, and you'll see that. So it's beneficial for you to understand that you will have focus points. You won't be addressing every single person. Um, and then the benefits, like, what are people looking for from your company? What are they expecting from you in order to make their life better? So, yeah, the whole point of identifying the target market is for you to be able to reach the right people, to not be losing out on time or money when it comes to targeting people online, because you could be investing in the likes of ads and targeting the wrong people, and that's money that is now gone and you can't reclaim back again. So you want to get it as precise as you can. So you can do segmentation then on your market for this, in order to kind of break down who your target market is. So there are a few here that I've listed out. The first one is demographic segmentation. So, like I said, you could be looking at age, gender, income, occupation, education level, marital status, religion, nationality. That's demographic. So kind of like, what is the little pieces that make up this person in terms of like their experiences in the world so far, and how that aligns with your company or enterprise. The second one is geographic segmentation. So beyond looking at maybe location, you could be looking at, are they in a city or are they in the countryside? What is the culture of where they're living? What is the language? So there's a different few things that fall into geography there. Then behavior segmentation, then you're looking at the actions. And like we said earlier, the likes of Google Analytics will do that and other analytics that are included in software. So be looking at the types of people based on maybe how much time they spend on a website. You could be looking at online reviews of the type of different people that leave positive reviews and negative reviews, and what's the difference between the two of them. And same thing for new returning customers, like why are people returning and making repeat purchases or coming back to the social enterprise and availing of the services over and over again, as opposed to the person that does it one time and doesn't come back again. So important to know the different segmentations there of customers from the behavior they have. Then psychographic, then you're looking at the likes of personality, values, attitudes, opinions, interests, and lifestyles. So yeah, just looking at kind of some of the things there, for attitudes, you could be looking at people that would be politically inclined to look towards the left or the right or the center. Um, might be looking at personality types then, in terms of like, is the person that avails of your service, are they someone that is very extroverted or introverted? So there is a lot there when it comes to psychographic, but the the value of these four boxes, demographic, geographic, behavioral, and psychographic, is just to help you like flesh out the person and the target market. And it's really important just to be able to identify that they can fall into each of these buckets. And you could include all of these four buckets here in order to uh, come up with the target market and break them down this way. It's just a good way as well if you're trying to share maybe within your team who the target market is when it comes to digital marketing. It's easy for them to look at, okay, we have demographic, geographic, behavioral. It makes it easy to read through it and have a very clear understanding of who you will be targeting online with your content or your ads or whatever it may be when it comes to the strategy. So understanding your stakeholders, like I said, there's different people you could be targeting online, which is the reason I keep using stakeholders, because the people you're interacting with might not be customers either. And there might be, if you're a social enterprise, you're looking at the likes of donors, volunteers, or you might be trying to attract business partners. Um, for businesses then that are for profit, you might be looking at the customer. The customer also might or might not be the end user. So to give an example of that, a child normally is an end user for a toy, meaning the parent is the customer because they buy the toy, but then they give the toy to the child, and the child is the end user because the parent isn't going to be using the toy. It's not made for them. So that's the difference between customer and end user. But in a lot of some cases, it might be important for you to understand that who you're talking to online may be the customer sometimes, and it may be the end user or other times, or they might be both at the same time. If the person buying, for example, if I'm looking for a new speaker, I'm going to be buying it and I'm going to be using it. So I am both the customer and the end user. And also looking at investors as well, maybe if you're a company that would be looking to bring in venture capitalists, they want to see what your digital marketing presence is like. So it's important for you to take that into consideration as well. So it's, again, very specific to every company. So it's something that you will be tailoring as you go in, understanding who each stakeholder is for you. Uh, um, and like I said before as well, even for social enterprises, it's just as important for them to focus on maybe who the customers are as much as it is for profit businesses, because it's about the messaging, the content, and everything you're working in within your strategy, that it is aligning with the people that are going to be consuming it. And that just really allows you then to just like be able to finesse your strategy as you go along. knowing that maybe the trends for different stakeholders are changing and adapting to that environment as well. So creating personas here, this is an example I made for the social enterprises. So for example, volunteer is going to be a very different persona from the patron. So the volunteer persona, if you're going to be making one up, is someone maybe who is very value driven. There is a reason that they are volunteering with the social enterprise because they want to help out. It might be something within their culture, it could be something to do with the demographic, or there's a myriad of reasons. When you look at the patrons, then the people who would be donating money, that would be a whole different persona. So you'd need to make up a persona for them as well. And when I say persona as well, you can get a one-pager template if you just Google it online, even on Google Images, and you'll find it. It's basically where you create a fictional person that is reflective of your general stakeholder, whether it's a customer, for example, for profit business, or in this situation, I'm showing that a social enterprise will probably need to have three personas: the volunteers, the patrons, and the business partners, in order to understand when they are putting out content and that it is resonating with either one, two, or all of the stakeholders at hand. But you will have different content for different stakeholders at different times. For then small or medium-sized enterprises, it's quite different then. More than likely, you're looking at customers most of the time, people who are maybe who have bought something from you already. You want to make sure that they are aware that your product and service is available at any time so that they can come back and keep availing of whatever you're offering. And then prospects are people that maybe haven't availed of your products or services yet, and they are maybe thinking about it. So it's kind of your role then as a digital marketer to kind of entice them, build a relationship with them through the social channels, and to allow them to go through the customer journey with ease, whether it's through the social media to the website, or from social media to coming into a shop, or whatever it may be. So yeah, when you're creating a persona in this instance, I would be making one, because the customer and the prospect is going to be more likely the same, because a prospect will eventually move into a customer if you're successful in doing that. And a customer has been a prospect previously. There was a point where they considered buying from you, and they eventually did, which turned them into a customer. So I'd be recommending doing one persona in this instance. So, like I said, you're creating fictional characters here that represent your target audience. Give them a name even, and then you'll be putting in the likes of, their age, their occupation, where do they live, what's maybe their educational background, and their values, and maybe you could find a quote as well, of something maybe from, like, reviews are quite good sometimes for this, in terms of maybe picking out a quote from a review that was left online that is maybe reflective of your customers in general. Um, yeah, and the basis for personas is, first of all, for yourself, and have it visible to yourself whenever you're doing content, because then when you're building the content, you're thinking of, okay, this is my persona. Let's call the persona Alex, and Alex needs to know that we're having a new service coming out soon. They are a current customer. They have their needs. They have these motivations. They have these values. So by you being aware of those specific attributes of your personas, it's going to be very easy for you to make content then that's going to be aligned with them, and they're going to feel that as well, and they're going to be more likely then to go on the journey through the digital channels to either avail of the product or service, or to engage with social enterprise. So it's very important to stay ahead of market trends, and you know the way to do this is to kind of stay up to date with relevant channels and bodies that are in the industry that you're in. And we mentioned earlier the likes of the library apps that could potentially have the publications that would be relevant to you to stay up to date. Um, so newsletters and magazines and uh, newspapers are really good for that. On LinkedIn as well, you can find groups that are dedicated to your industry. And then always look up the industry you're in, like name it and Google it with report or annual report and see what comes up, because that will give you good data as well in terms of what's happening and what's in trend for you. This will always help you then to navigate any changing winds that might be out there in your industry, so that you will be able to change messaging if it's relevant to you, or change content, or update the website. There's so many things you need to be aware of, lots of moving parts. So if you're up to date, it's going to make it so much easier, as opposed to being reacting and being too slow when the change has already happened. So analyzing the market research data is kind of the next step then, once you have gone through all of the actual user interviews, focus groups, or maybe the secondary research such as competitive analysis and going through journals or whatever it may be. It's good for you to analyze then what you have learned and what is relevant to the business. And this is, looking at what are the trends, listing out the patterns that might be out there, and looking at the insights that you need to be aware of and that your team needs to be aware of. And all of this really is for the goal of getting the understanding of your target audience, so that you can finesse your strategy development and help you on a day-to-day basis as well when it comes to making decisions. And making the persona is one example of doing that, but putting it all into the digital marketing strategy document as well is a way for you to analyze and kind of present information. So the power of forecasting change, like, we don't really need to go into this. Like, understand that if there is a change in your demographics, for example, that you will have to change your messaging. You will need to change your strategy before it's too late. You don't want to be looking at your analytics one day and see a huge drop off in your customers because you didn't adapt to what was needed of them. So it's really important for you to stay on top of that and be able to do the changes in good time, so that you are speaking to your target audience and giving them the information that they actually want or need. So if we just bring it all together now in terms of like what we kind of went through within this module, step one, strengths, identify where your strengths are. So a lot of the time, what market research brings to the fore is what you're actually good at. What is the unique factor about your business? And that could be based on the user interviews. It could be based on the research you did looking at reviews. It could be on focus groups, because it's really good for you to be able then to promote that, because that's why people will want to come to you. I should also put in here as well weaknesses, because if you know your weaknesses as well, you know what to improve upon, um, so that the strengths aren't there by themselves, and then there might be the strengths sometimes may not be enough by themselves. If the weaknesses are too much of a weakness and it's having a big impact on the customer, it's really important for you to identify those as well. So strengths and weaknesses is kind of like what you'll learn from the market research in the end, and that will kind of like allow you then to go into the strategy, the digital marketing strategy, and work with your strengths and weaknesses. So then number two here is goal setting. As you've seen with all of the activities for market research, you need to have clear objectives. If you don't have that, you're not really going to reap the benefits of all of them. you need to be able to go into each user interview, focus group, or whatever it may be, and have deep clarity of why you're doing it. Because if you know what that is, you will be able to get as much insights from it as possible. And it's so important in the run up to it, because you are going to put together questions, for example, that are going to get you the most valuable insights. And also, when you're reviewing it at the end as well, you will have a very sharp knowing of what you're looking for as well, whether it's there or not. And then finally, tools and resources. Select your toolkit. As I said at the beginning, some of you might have a budget, so you will be able to invest in some things. Others will not, and that's not a problem. You will be able to use plenty of free tools and resources online and to execute a very successful digital marketing strategy. So, as always, we have our additional resources here, which will allow you to kind of go into more areas of market research and kind of talk about where it can take you. So the book I mentioned at the beginning was called The Mom Test. It's a really good book. I would definitely recommend that you buy it and get an electronic version on Kindle, for example. Brilliant way to understand how to put together user interviews, and really the what they teach you about user interviews here and how to do them is just as relevant for you to put together focus groups, to put together surveys, anything that you're interacting with the person. It has really good skill sets in there for you to learn. So I would really recommend that you do that. And there's loads of others there as well. So if you feel like diving into any of those areas, feel free to do so. So thank you again for your time today. Again, always, if you have any issues or have any questions, just let me know, and we'll talk to each other very soon. Thank you.